Welcome, Shad, and welcome to those who have not been on the previous interviews. My name is Katie Stewart. I was asked to facilitate this meeting by some chairs in CD3. Currently, I am uncontested to be the chair of CD3, so that's why I'm here. I also sit on the executive committee for the La Plata County Dems. So, Shad, we have 7 questions for you and one that's very specific. Several of the county chairs took time to develop these questions, and if the audience has additional ones, please drop them in the chat box for the moderator, and we will get to them if we can. We ask that you be concise and specific in your answers so that we don't have to cut you off, but know that we will move along if necessary because we want to get all of these questions answered. And we do have a tight 45 minutes to be fair, like I said, democratic. And our 8th question is specific to you. And as I stated earlier, if we have time, we'll take additional questions from the audience, and we will also allow time for your closing remarks. So at this point, I'm going to ask you to take a minute and a half to introduce yourself, and we'll dive in.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. I know many of you on this call, so I won't go into the depths or background too much, but I'm Shad Murib, running for chair of the Colorado Democratic Party. I'm from Western Colorado. I'm out of Eagle County and have spent the past better half of the decade running campaigns in Western Colorado for both statewide candidates and also more regional candidates. I'm running on a platform of really 3 reasons. One is that I'm thrilled we have these legislative majorities in the House and Senate. But I strongly believe it's the imperative of the next chair to make sure that we protect and grow these majorities. So whether you're a progressive from Boulder County, a moderate from Douglas, or maybe somewhere in between from Southern Colorado, I want to make sure that you have a home in the Democratic Party and that we're helping you with incumbency protection plans and making sure the county's chairs and vice chairs are clued into how we can best support our local candidates on the ground and grow our majorities. The second reason is, like many of you, I was devastated by the Club Q shooting a few months ago, and Western Colorado is no stranger to this. Even though we're a blue state, Republicans still have majorities of sheriffs, district attorneys, county clerks, county commissioners, and these folks are not allowing us to be as progressive as we expect us to be with the sort of blue tinge of the state, and also with majorities in the legislature, because when the rubber meets the road, they're either slowing or outright obstructing our progress on the ground. Tina Peters is a great example of a county clerk who's inviting corruption into their election office. We have county commissioners who are refusing to build housing or enforce our oil and gas laws. We have sheriffs around the state who are refusing to enforce our gun safety laws. So I want to work with you all to build and develop a new organization with the party focused on flipping those seats from red to blue. And then finally, before we get to questions, I'm a big believer in customer service. I'm a first-generation American. My family moved here from Lebanon. They opened up a series of small businesses on the Front Range and taught me the value of customer service early on as a kid. So my commitment to you as chair is to work closely with you to build programs that are scalable up and scalable down, depending on the size of your county or campaign, and building campaigns and programs that you're actually excited to use and be a part of. As a Western Coloradan, I've learned a lot on what that actually means for us. And so excited to work with you all towards that goal. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, Shad. We'll get started. So the first question, describe what you believe to be the 2 most important challenges facing the CDP and your plans to overcome them.
Yeah, thank you. So I think the biggest challenge that we're going to have is complacency and making sure that donors and the federal committees who have helped us finance our races over the past 20 years or so understand that Colorado is not fully a blue state and that we're still deserving of resources. I think we're heading into a couple cycles in 2024 and 2026 where you're going to see diminishing resources coming from the committees that have largely funded our campaigns over the past couple of years. So I think if we don't get our financial house in order, we're going to be running into a buzzsaw of trouble of running the types of campaigns that we expect to be successful in Colorado. That means we need a chair that's focused pretty exclusively on fundraising and making sure that we're expanding our reach across the state. So I'd like to put year-round organizers in communities across the state, especially in CD3 and in CD8, to make sure that we are organizing around issues and great local candidates, but of course, defeating Boebert and reelecting Yadira Caraveo, who are going to be big challenges in 2024. The second thing that goes along with that is I'm very concerned that we have not done enough locally to actually bolster our Democratic ranks across the state. If you're a Democrat 10 minutes off the I-25 corridor, we're doing great. It looks like we have huge majorities and we're doing big progressive things. But those of us who are across the other side of the Eisenhower Tunnel, or maybe down south or out east in Colorado, don't feel like we have that same access to resources, and we're often just facing challenge after challenge and making sure that we have the attention we need in Colorado. So I think we need to grow beyond that I-25 corridor, and the next chair also needs to be responsible for fundraising for efforts to actually improve our footprint across the state.
All right, thank you. Question number 2. Describe one major fundraising campaign that you personally managed, including for what entity, your strategies to meet the objectives, and the approximate net amount raised. What was the biggest challenge to fundraising for the CDP?
Yeah, so the biggest fundraising task I've taken on has been raising about $8 million to support Democratic candidates across the state for the General Assembly, primarily with the mission of electing Democrats to the state legislature. That was for the Colorado Citizens Alliance, but it was also working with the DSCF, part of the CDP, to make sure that their budgets were actually sound. And as you guys know, every race is getting more and more expensive. So when I manage these cycles, we were taking a look at races where we were trying to take out Randy Baumgardner. Emily Tracy was a great candidate that year, and we invested some resources to help that effort, but we were unsuccessful. We were also tasked with making sure that we were expanding our reach as a party. So my strategies was not just to take a look at the safe seats, right? It's very easy to take a look at some seats in Commerce City, Arvada, or Littleton and say, these are trending blue seats, we need to raise money to cement them. What I really like doing is looking at reach seats and giving donors a clear plan and a strategy to donate to feel like we're actually changing the world in some way. And so you guys might remember a candidate named Tom Sullivan, who's now a state senator in the General Assembly. He actually ran for Senate the first time in 2016 and lost. But I was able to find $700,000 to support him and making sure that he was running the campaign and that we had the communications out there necessary to show that we were coming for Arapahoe County. We were going to turn that county blue and make sure to elect Tom Sullivan or another Democrat down the line. When we give donors a clear plan and something that they can actually invest in and feel like they're growing an initiative and part of something special, we can actually change the world. And that's something that we failed to do in CD3 in the past, right? We had the federal committees and the state committees all looking at Western Colorado as a lost cause. I don't know about you guys, but I was told plenty of times that it's too far to drive to come and support some of the campaigns we were working on, even when we saw something special happening in Western Colorado. And so that's something that I really believe in, is making sure that we use this opportunity we have in CD3 and these counties that are a light shade of red. How do we turn them from a light shade of blue? We actually put people on the ground, we actually show up, and we have a chair that's focused on coordinating resources to make sure that we're actually running the types of campaigns locally that yield success, not just using the excuse that it's too far to drive or that it feels like a long shot and we need to cement our gains on the I-25 corridor. So yeah, the $8 million budget was an extremely difficult challenge to raise for, both on the hard and soft side. I was really proud to be able to get it done and be able to improve our investments across the state beyond what our initial goals were.
All right, thank you. Our third question. What role do you believe county parties play in the organizational structure of the CDP, particularly those in CD3, and how would you expand dialogue, improve communication, and facilitate collaboration with them?
Well, one of the things that we need to do is to make sure that at the state party, all of the functions that we have some sort of access to technology. But we also have to be pretty mindful that, for example, in my place in Eastvale, I know which corner of the apartment actually has cell service and internet service and which one doesn't. I also know exactly where cell service is going to drop off or internet service is going to drop off along I-70 or on 50. And we need to recognize that not every county is going to be able to drive to Denver for an in-person meeting. So one of the things that I really want to do is make sure that everything we do as a state party is accessible, thinking of those in mind who are transit averse or it's difficult to drive. And so, my commitment to you all is to actually work on hybrid models for every state party gathering to make sure that Western Colorado is, able to participate. If we get a snowstorm, it makes it impossible to cross I-70 in any sort of reasonable amount of time to make it to these things that are unpredictable. In terms of expanding dialogue, I think, my experience in 2022 was of trying to desperately get resources to Western Colorado, and we saw something special when we were able to see that we were actually having an opportunity to win in CD3, but we noticed particular trouble counties, some of them in Steamboat, some of them in Grand Junction, many of them in Pueblo, where young people and Latinos weren't turning out. The more we tried to converse with the state party and with the federal committees who were deploying resources and helping us run our campaigns, the more resistance we ran into. It was often like pulling teeth trying to get an office even placed in Eagle County and to find the staff resources to be able to support that effort. which we are excited to work with Jennifer on. But that era needs to end. We need to have constant communication with Western counties because we run campaigns differently. We have pretty unique challenges out here that are just different than what Front Range communities have. For example, knocking on 40 or 50 doors in a couple hours in the Front Range might seem like a piece of cake, but for us, it's a lot more difficult. One of my favorite things to do is to bring members of the legislature from the Front Range to come and knock on doors in Western Colorado. And every time they complain about getting a bad map, I have to remind them that we actually gave them one of our best, most dense maps that they could possibly knock on. And those are the types of expectations we need to set and the type of perspective we need to put into the CDP is that we have to run campaigns differently here. We need to open up access to make it either hybrid models or virtually. And, in the absence of being able to have meetings in Denver, I want to have some meetings in Western Colorado for the state party as well. We need to bring people out there to understand the different types of challenges that we have compared to our friends in the Front Range.
All right, thank you, Shad. So I believe we're on question 4. The CDP typically funds paid regional organizers the last 6 months or so before an election. Do you support this strategy? Why or why not? And if not, what would your strategy be and why?
I support the strategy in that we do need organizers on the ground the last 6 months, but I see it as a yes and. I think we simply haven't had the financial resources or the dedication to fundraising in the past to support the effort of folks like Kevin who've been on the ground and hired by the party to do amazing work. We need to significantly increase our investment in making sure that we're putting year-round organizers on the ground in every part of the state to make sure that we're bolstering our efforts. When these campaigns come and go, the party still remains, right? It's not like the campaign season ends and the Democratic Party walks away. All of us on this call are still there trying to do good work. I think that the next chair would be well served to make sure that we are dramatically improving our financial outlook over the next couple of years and dedicating those increased capacity to putting year-round organizers in CD3 and CD8 and in Southern Colorado, especially when I'm talking about CD3, it's not just Western Colorado. I think we also have to include Pueblo and Southwest Colorado and the Valley there as well. There are a huge amount of voters that we are simply not talking to that we should be talking to much earlier and much more often. An example of this is I was running the Western Colorado program for Senator Hickenlooper in 2020. And one of the issues that we run into both then, but then we also ran into again in 2022, is that you see young voter drop off and Latino voter drop off in significant parts of Western Colorado that can make up the difference between, say, Adam Frisch and Lauren Boebert in 2022 or our eventual Democratic candidate against Boebert in 2024. And so if we really want to give those young people and Latinos the confidence that the Democratic Party is there for them, that our candidates are people that they can actually believe in, and that we're not just asking them to turn in their ballot, we need to put them in our persuasion universes just as much as we're putting them in our GOTV universes. We need to be talking to them constantly and more often. And in the Front Range, a lot of the parties are a little bit bigger. It's a lot denser. It's a lot easier to get to an area. You can walk across the state Senate district in Denver. Poor Dylan Roberts has 11 counties that he has to traverse, and it takes him an entire day to get from one side of the district to the other. So we need to be cognizant of the fact that having year-round organizers helps us build that community over the long term in ways that just this kind of boom and bust cycle of every 18 months just doesn't allow us to do.
All right, thank you. So here's a really great question. And a complicated one, multi-pronged. Jared will throw it up on the slide. Given the constraints of campaign finance laws, how can the House Majority Project, the coordinated campaign, and county parties more effectively work together for volunteer deployment in CD3?
Yes, I love this question. So I've been on the other side of the coordinated campaigns for a long time from the party. And one of the things that I think is such a simple answer, but I think I can dig into some of the details on is just much, much more communication. We also need to set some of the ground rules early and set some terms of agreement with our candidates who are currently engaged in a primary, and they might not be thinking of the general. They just want to get to the general and get through their primary. But we should set up some terms of engagement in terms of how we're setting up offices with that candidate's campaign should they move to the general. For example, in Pueblo, they own their building, right? They actually have the space to be able to host volunteer activities, whether it's phone banks or launching canvases. We should make sure that we are utilizing the spaces that we already have from the counties and vice chairs, separating them as we need according to the campaign finance laws and sort of walling off the federal and state activities. But we should start those conversations early to make sure that there's no question of the type of space that we're going to use with counties when the coordinated comes to town. The second thing is hiring a staff is so incredibly important. And as many of you know, it is so hard right now to find good campaign staff and hire them quickly and be able to pay them the salary that they deserve and give the benefits that folks now expect. But I think we can start that process a lot earlier. And again, I think we enter into terms of agreements with our campaigns who seem like they're going to be able to move on to the general, and making sure that when we hire, we are working with county chairs and vice chairs to hire local folks. There are a lot of really talented folks of all ages, of all backgrounds, and of all levels of experience that we should be bringing on to join our coordinated staff. Because again, this nature of bringing in staff that moves to Colorado, maybe moves to Steamboat or Pueblo or Durango, and then leaves right after the election doesn't build community. And it's not a healthy way to organize in the long term. And a lot of times it just kind of gets in the way, right? When you have someone fly in, they're kind of hoarding the volunteers and then they're moving on and not supporting some of the local races. So I think setting up those terms of agreement early, making sure that all the campaigns are communicated with and have an idea of what our objectives are, and that me as chair is working with you guys to determine what those objectives are that would make your lives easier and make you feel like you're more effective, is something that I've always wished for in a coordinated campaign. And I think it's not something that there are huge barriers to being able to coordinate long before we get to that point where we're in a general election and always scrambling to figure it out. We just need to be a little bit more proactive and thoughtful about how we do it.
All right. Thank you. We'll move into, you've actually already touched on our sixth question, which is regarding virtual meetings, and if you would keep state central and executive committee meetings virtual or hybrid. I believe your answer is yes, but if it's not, you could elaborate.
Yeah, no, I think it's yes. And I want to say yes. And, for a lot of us out here, going to the grocery store is kind of an afternoon long endeavor, right? Let alone if we have to go to the hospital for a doctor's visit. I know I plan my days around how long it's going to take me to get to work and then also to run an errand and then also get home. It's not like folks on the front line who go and complete a grocery store trip in 20 minutes, right? It's a little bit harder for most of us. And so not only does that make participating in these activities in person more difficult, but it's also adding costs for those of us. It is very frustrating, and it breaks my heart that most of us who live out here in Western Colorado on April 1st, where my election is, are going to have to go down the night before and pay for a hotel room and then stay to participate and potentially pay for another night of a hotel room for the Obama dinner if folks want to stay in Denver. So we're looking at spending a few $100s to participate in a party activity that technology over the past few years has shown us we don't necessarily need to do if folks don't want to go to the dinner, or if they can't necessarily afford a hotel room for a couple nights, if they don't have access to a vehicle that can get them to the area. It is an extreme frustration to me that we have this issue. It kind of reminds me of like if someone sends us a login to a minivan account, but you're going to lose service in a certain part of the neighborhood when you're knocking on doors, and you might not be able to upload your data right away or quickly. It's just this kind of lack of foresight into what it takes for rural folks to actually participate in party activities. So not only is the answer yes, but it's something that I've also thought about for our friends on the Front Range who also have childcare issues. A lot of people can't afford to spend 6 to 8 hours at a party event, especially when our party events sometimes, the duration of time ranges from 1 hour to 8 hours. We need to make sure that we're offering alternatives for childcare, that we're being really mindful of people's time, and that we're opening up access to the folks who might not have access to a vehicle, to people with disabilities, or people who have a work shift that they know they're going to have to make it to halfway through and can't necessarily make it the 25-minute drive to the hotel or the conference center. And so I really believe strongly in this, that we need to make sure that we're using technology to our advantage to improve this process.
All right. Thank you for elaborating on that. So heading into our final standard question, what are your thoughts about caucus and assembly as a method of ballot access? What alternatives do you believe Colorado could pursue? And having read the article by Theory in the Colorado Sun, what elements appeal to you, if any, and why? And are you aware that 5 chairs quit in 2022 before caucus and assembly? So that was a lot, and luckily Jared put it on the slide.
Thank you, Jared. Look, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm no fan of caucus. I think it's exclusionary and that it prevents young people, working people, parents, and often people who are low income and again have to go to work or might work unusual hours from being able to participate in our party activities. It is extremely difficult for most candidates to attend, for most people to attend caucus, right? We usually get the same old folks every time. The alternative, though, is frustrating too, in that the petition thresholds are really high and it costs so much money to access the ballot through petitions that if we get rid of caucus without a plan to fix the petition process, we could inadvertently find ourselves in this position where only the wealthy and well-connected or white candidates have access to the ballot. And, candidates of color and low-income folks often, despite this frustration of not being able to have working people or young people or others participate in caucus, often find that the caucus system is the only way for them to access the ballot. I was just talking to Cole Berger and Elizabeth Velasco, and I'm blessed to have both of their support. And we were talking about this issue of how do we make sure that folks like Cole and Elizabeth can continue to run for office, because the petition process is so difficult that they both went through caucus. When you expand that to a statewide process for US Senate or governor, it becomes even more difficult for them to fathom. So we should consider getting rid of caucus. I think that's something that we really need to think deeply about. We also need to make sure that we have a plan to make sure that our party can continue to operate in an effective way and organize its leadership positions, but also so that we are not restricting the ballot to people who are interesting candidates who have something to offer, but they just might not be wealthy or well-connected. I, for one, don't necessarily trust Kent Theory's theory on democracy as much as maybe the governor does or some other folks. So I'm not sure he's wholly altruistic in his effort to get rid of caucus, because I don't think he's thinking about that next step. And that's where the critical role of the next chair of the Democratic Party can play, is actually forcing the governor, forcing Kent Theory, making sure the legislature is focused on, sure, if we want to get rid of caucus, we should. There's obviously flaws with it. How are we doing so in a way that's responsible and make sure that people of all means can have access to our ballot?
All right, thank you. So at this time, I'm going to move on to the very Shad specific question, but it also looks like we'll have time to take questions that have been submitted to me directly. So here we go. It's up there, but I'm going to read it out loud. Your wife, Carrie Donovan, was a long-serving state senator and strongly considered a run for CD3 in 2022. Your work experience includes extensive time with both Hickenlooper and Polis. If you're elected CDP chair, do you foresee any conflicts of interest between your role and your professional and personal relationships? If not, why? If so, how will you address those to avoid the appearance of conflict of interest?
Yeah, well, for one thing, getting Carrie's endorsement in this campaign was the hardest one so far. So I'm glad she's endorsed me, but it was a difficult one. So she's not planning to run for Congress. We've agreed that if I win this position, this role does not allow for someone in a relationship to be able to also run for office because of the worry about putting their thumb on the scale. So I don't think you guys have to worry about that. Carrie is an active and engaged member of our Democratic community, and I know she's excited to help our eventual Democratic nominee win in 2024. And she's offered that support to everyone that she can think of. So that's where I think Carrie's best role is going to be over the next couple of years, is using her success as a state senator and a champion for progressive values and making sure that we win and defeat Lauren Boebert in 2024. If I win this race, and I'm sure if she was here, she'd be happy to say it too, she will not be a candidate for that office. Hickenlooper and Polis. I think I just had a point of disagreement with the governor in my last answer that I gave about not necessarily trusting Kent Theory as much as he does. The thing that's interesting about Hickenlooper and Polis is I don't always see eye to eye with these guys. I really appreciate them bringing me onto their teams because I've created a habit of winning in red districts and winning in Western and Colorado. And they know that. And so they bring me on to argue with them. They bring me on to be a contrarian and to push them. That's a role that I play very comfortably with people in positions of power. I've disagreed with Hickenlooper plenty. I've disagreed with Polis plenty. And I'm not sure what their future ambitions are necessarily, but I think any sort of perception that I have a personal relationship that would get in the way of me conducting my duties as chair, I hope I can eliminate for you, because not only do I want to put the party first and the success of the party first before any individual, but it's something that I've worked really hard at in my career to make sure that I'm a bridge builder, right? So when Hickenlooper has problem with the progressive wing of our party because he's not perceived as progressive, I'm really proud to have the endorsement of someone named True Apodaca in Denver, Colorado, who's the SEIU political director, who's often at odds with John Hickenlooper. They're supporting me because I've been able to bring those people into the fold and make sure that John Hickenlooper's meeting with them. So the benefit you get with me is somebody who, when I call Jared Polis, when I call John Hickenlooper, they answer the call because they know I'm going to either speak a hard truth to them or say something to them that they need to think about seriously if they have some challenges within the party. And so, I want to earn your confidence on that. I don't foresee any potential conflicts of interest at all with Carrie, Polis, or Hickenlooper, but I do think those close relationships I have across the federal delegation. I got to know Brittany Pedersen in 2010. I've known Jenna Griswold for a number of years. I worked with her to enact our campaign finance and voter expansion laws for 2019. I know Jason Crow, we served on a board to elect young women together back in 2010 before he was a congressman. I have these deep-seated relationships with the federal delegation that I'm really proud of. We've accomplished big things together, and it goes beyond any sort of personal or professional preference. It's straight to making sure the Democrats are successful.
All right, thank you, Shad. So I'm going to ask as many questions as I can, but we'd also like to give you a little bit of time at the end to do a closing remark. And we're trying to keep it at 45 minutes tight.
No problem.
So, so this question came from Tom Morrissey, who's here in La Plata County, but I'm sure you've also known him as CDP staff.
Yep.
He asked, in order to achieve your goals, you will need CDP staff who already have full-time jobs and they're stretched pretty thin. How will you reprioritize and or hire new staff to achieve your objectives?
Yeah, it's a great question. The people down at CDP do remarkable, phenomenal work. I mean, they're so hardworking, and I agree with that characterization that many of them are doing the job of 2 or 3 people. I love managing teams. I love giving clear direction and making sure that job descriptions are tight and that we're providing quantifiable goals for staff to be able to meet their objectives. In terms of how I manage a team, I have really high expectations. Anybody who's worked for me, of the hundreds of folks I've managed over the years, will tell you that I have extremely high expectations. They're also crystal clear. I make sure that folks have exactly the information they need to run a plan. If they don't have the resources they need, I want to create an atmosphere where they can come and tell me that and make sure that we do get them the resources they need, because after all, we created this plan together and we need to achieve it. The thing that's clear to me is that the staff that we have at CDP is excellent and they need more help. So one of the things I'm interested in, especially with the financial goals that I want to set for the party, is bringing in a digital firm to help supplement some of the work that we're doing as a team, and also a finance consultant who's worked with many members of our delegation. Whoever that right fit is TBD. Nobody's been offered a job. But those are the 2 key pieces that I'm starting to think through on how can we add some capacity to the finance team to make sure that we're increasing financial transparency for counties, both at the county level and also at the initiative level. How can we bring more dollars into the party? And can we set a budget very quickly by the end of Q2 that we can start fundraising for to add additional capacity, whether it's comms, year-round organizing. But I think many of you who I've spoken with know that my big priority is building a new branch of the Democratic Party that's focused explicitly on these local elections. I really believe that if we do those things well, and we put year-round organizers on the in CD3 and in CD8 especially, and if we're able to relieve some of the duties from our team so they can focus intensely on doing one thing great instead of 3 or 4 things, sort of 80% capacity, we're going to be able to skyrocket into a new level of success that we have not yet experienced. And I really do think that in order to expand to Western Colorado, to make sure Pueblo feels like they have the support and encouragement they need to feel like they're decision makers at the table for an incredibly crucial part of CD3's success in 2024, we need more capacity. And so that's my commitment to you. I have a fully fleshed out plan that I sent around in a platform in terms of how we fundraise for those dollars and where we place those folks. But they're excellent there. We need to give them room to succeed, and that means adding capacity.
All right, thank you. So Russ asked, what policies or action that Morgan Carroll has implemented have worked and will you continue? And which could have gone better and would you like to change and how?
Yeah, Morgan's done a phenomenal job building the organizing wing of the party. I mean, if there's a high bar anyone has set, it's around organizing for our volunteer work and making sure that we are structuring our campaigns well. So Morgan has done an excellent job there, especially at the top of the ticket, right? Making sure that we are, electing Brittany Pedersen, doing great candidate recruitment at that level, and just closing my speaker there, and making sure that we are running effective campaigns to grow our majority. She's done an excellent job in. I view my role as chair as kind of grabbing the baton from Morgan and running this race out west. We need to elect a Democratic county commission in Mesa County. We need to make sure that the Valley has the support they need, whether it's financial or people, to turn some of those counties back from red to blue. And we also need to make sure that the high country continues to post high Democratic gains to offset some of our potential losses in places like Delta or Rio Grande or Moffett, or places that are just a little bit further away from being a blue county. And so, long story short, I think she's done an excellent job organizing around the Front Range. I think we need to scale up that success out west and in Southern Colorado. And the people on this call know how to do it. But I think we can all agree we just need more resources. We need more support. We need more coordination. And we need more action and intentional inclusion in these decisions that we make as a party.
All right, thank you. So Kirby McLaurin from La Plata County asked, the current precinct organizer role may be too large for many people to do effectively. Could you talk about your ideas about options for ways of organizing neighborhoods?
Yes. I don't know if Debbie Rule is on this Zoom from Garfield County. They're doing something very cool. They're starting to explore alternatives to the traditional PO model and going back to that sort of neighborhood model. I'm a product of the Obama campaign in 2008, so that was music to my ears to hear that Debbie was considering finding alternatives. And so I think I mentioned this to you, Kirby, when we spoke. I want to figure out a way to see what's successful. I love testing these theories, especially in years like 2023, where we have a little bit of room to move, and seeing how we can alter the model to not only excite people and bring people into being POs, but how do we train them much more effectively? Rather than getting sort of an email with a training and a kind of sort of touch and go basis with some RPOs, how can we empower you, the county chairs and vice chairs, to more effectively manage these folks and make sure that they have attainable, quantifiable goals? And also, do we need to stick to a strict PO model that we've used in the past? I don't think so. A lot of recruitment for POs in Western Colorado and Southern Colorado is difficult, right? So we need to be able to innovate and create new pathways to finding success and reaching our Democratic voters, creating more neighborhood groups, and really empowering people to run campaigns at the local level that they feel comfortable with. It's something that I really loved from those campaigns in 2008 and 2012, and I don't think any campaign has done a perfect job replicating it since. Western Colorado, to me, working with our eventual Democratic nominee, and maybe if the collection of candidates for CD3 are interested in working with us on this, I think we have a huge opportunity to really change the PO model and expand it into ways that actually make sense for Western Colorado, whether it's larger terrains, whether it's more targeted work through phones or text. But I'm really excited about what Debbie's doing out there, and I think we should all put her on the spot and tell us how it goes as she continues to explore it. But I'm happy to connect folks with her if they want to talk more, but it's something that I've been really excited about.
All right, thank you. So Larry Patrick out of Warfano asked, the Colorado Republicans have all 5 of their candidates for state chair being election deniers. How would you as CDP chair handle the likely misinformation being pushed by them in 2024?
Yeah, it's true. With the absence of Varela from that race, every single candidate for GOP chair is an election denier at some level. It's pretty scary. In Eagle County this past cycle, Joe Oltman, if you all know him, the extremist far-right paramilitary leader of the far-right in Colorado Springs, was encouraging his volunteers in Western Colorado to go to polling centers, to flash their brights, and make sure that people knew they were being watched at their polling center. These are things that we need to fight back against now. These are things that we need to inform the public about their rights about now. And this is stuff that we need to bolster our voter protection units to get ready to fight. These people are only getting more and more emboldened. And whereas Christy Burton Brown, the current and soon to be former chair, was extremely ineffective and poor at their job, she swam in these types of waters, but she didn't fully bite down. The next chair that we have for the Republican Party is going to fully embrace election denialism. If we have DeSantis or Trump on the ballot in 2024, they're going to be emboldened and supported and encouraged by a presidential campaign and the millions of dollars that come with it to engage in voter intimidation. So not only do we need to staff up legally, we need to make sure that county chairs and vice chairs and candidates have access to a voter protection network through CDP that is strengthened. It's already pretty strong. Morgan's done a really good job of organizing this every cycle, but we need to start early and often. And so just a little bit out of CD3, we also need to be taking a look at this outside of just general elections. The Republican Party is starting to challenge our election judges in court and file suit in places like El Paso. They're doing it in the suburbs and in some of these sort of emerging Democratic counties. So the more Colorado becomes a blue state, the more enraged and excitable these folks are going to get to engage in voter suppression tactics, election denialism, and we need to be on guard now. And so that's when I'm talking about increasing capacity. I do see the role of some of these year-round organizers on the ground being able to help increase those education efforts, make sure that we're bolstering our voter protection units, and are working directly with you all to make sure that we're finding stuff early that we need to pay attention to and being ready to act when the moment calls.
Great, thank you. I have 2 more questions I'd like to ask you before we head into closing. The first this is also from Larry out of Warfano. What would you be able to do to assist the CD3 candidate against Boebert in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I think that So I was running a couple races out west last cycle, and I told folks this and pulled my hair out about it to no response from folks both federally and also at the state level. We had an issue where we were starting to see precincts once we started getting early vote data come in. And I mentioned this a couple answers ago, but these were precincts just outside of Avon. They were just outside of Steamboat, just outside of Gunnison, just outside of Pueblo, just outside of Durango, where I was noticing that we had Democratic voter registration advantage, but we had Republicans winning these precincts by anywhere from 8 to 10 points. And so I was working with Elizabeth Velasco. I was working with a gentleman running for county commissioner in Garfield County, working with Megan Lukens, Julie McCluskey, Dylan Roberts, all these folks to see what could we do to actually reverse this trend. The campaigns listened and they deployed a lot of their very, very limited resources to these precincts to help correct it. CDP didn't, and the federal committees didn't. Again, we were told it's too far to drive to come and help you guys out. That's something that I think is something we should be very cognizant of in the future. And I talked at length just a few minutes ago about really engaging with younger voters and Latino voters much more frequently and much more often on the Western slope. I think that'll be helpful in making sure that we're doing that now will bolster any campaign in the future so that they can focus on unaffiliated. They can focus on bringing Republicans into the fold a lot like Adam did in 2022. And maybe Adam or Debbie will in 2024. And I think the CDP can help with that early, where they are going to be kind of fighting it out to get the nomination from Democrats. The other thing I think we can do is realize that we have to talk a little bit differently in Western Colorado than our Front Range folks like. Another story is I was representing Kathy Plummer as her general consultant. She was the candidate for State Board of Education at large. And the poll the party ran to figure out what our messaging was split the state into 3 factions: Denver, Colorado Springs, and then they called the rest of the state rural. So the poll only tested messages in ways that Aspen and Sterling would be getting the same messaging. Pueblo would be getting the same messaging as Durango. They would be getting the same messaging as Vail and Steamboat. Bennett, Colorado would be getting the same messaging as Avon. That type of lack of attention to detail in terms of the issues that are specific to our campaigns out here is totally unacceptable. So I also want to make sure that we're reconfiguring the way that we do our messaging research to make sure that, are we talking about climate change in the context of drought? Are we talking about agriculture in the context of ranches being forced to shut down because drought is either destroying their ability to raise the grass or hay that they need to feed their cattle? Are we talking about workers' rights in the context of this sort of transient workforce and the seasonal workforce we have in Western Colorado? I mean, these are things that we can do as a party to bolster our communications and our on-the-ground infrastructure to make sure we're actually talking to people in the context they understand. With me as chair, you're never going to get a messaging document that has you talking to voters the same way that we're talking to voters in Sterling, much less Littleton or Aurora. I think that we really need to make sure that we're building programs that are tailored to the places that we need to win it, not in the places that we've won and we're trying to expand.
Okay, I might have lied to you because I just had another question come in, but I was trying to follow up with one too. So we'll try to squeeze them both in. What role, if any, do you see county party chairs playing in the development of metrics and evaluation of the state party chair?
Of the state party chair in terms of if I'm doing a good job or not, or in terms of our programs?
I would say in terms of whether you're doing a good job or not.
Well, I will defer to you all, and if you want to elect me on April 1st when I'm up for re-election, I think that'll be a great challenge on if I've done a good job or not. So I'm at the whims of your vote and support. One thing that I am interested in is you guys have heard me talk about building this new organization within the party that helps us recruit for candidates and elect them at the local level. I know that many of you have been frustrated at the way that the party's gone about this in terms of the contest every election model of texting Democrats across the state. And I know that a lot of you have been given the opportunity to opt out for races that you don't want the state party touching. I think what's missing in this argument too is that the state party also needs to create metrics with all of you to figure out what are the races that we feel like we can win. Have we come within 97 votes of winning a county clerk seat in Grand County? Yes, that obviously feels like something that we should maybe be taking a look at in the next few years when that's up for re-election. Are we losing the Garfield County Commission by just 50 or 500 votes every time we put up these excellent, amazing candidates? Yes. this is a clear opportunity for us to engage. And so looking at how close a recent election has been, how much money each candidate has raised, what type of resources the county parties have, there's all sorts of metrics that I want to work with you all and develop so that we can find those races to not only just recruit candidates for and hope for the best, but where are the 30 or 40 races across the state that we can actually target with clear, concise data and show that we can win and deploy resources to effectively. I would expect you all to do the same when you're looking at my success as chair. Have I accomplished that? Have I worked with you all to put programs together with you in mind? Are we building campaigns that are scalable up and scalable down? Do you have that Western perspective in the coordinated campaign? And do our federal delegation members, our leadership in the General Assembly, and our constitutional offices know that they have to cross the Eisenhower Tunnel and they have to cross the divide to get to their voters and talk to them more frequently? That's the type of stuff that I want you to hold me accountable on. I think it's the job of a lifetime to be able to lead the Democratic Party. And so that constant feedback loop is going to be extremely important to making sure that we're doing those things right. I am no stranger to changing a program when we see that it's not working the way it needs to work. And so I'm really counting on you to make sure that I'm getting that feedback you need, to make sure that we're giving you everything that you all need to win our campaigns.
All right, thank you, Shad. So I'm going to go ahead and suspend the rules for a minute and go back to, I believe it was question number 5 regarding the House Majority Project and volunteer deployment. This past cycle, and I can speak to this personally, having worked on the coordinated campaign, we struggled a lot with fighting for volunteers between the county party, HMP races, and the coordinated. So I was asked to have you really laser focus in on how do we manage that volunteer deployment between all of these entities, trying to accomplish the same thing, but not working from the same bucket.
It is so hard because there's only so many folks to go around, right? But I think this is where I was thinking, it doesn't make sense for us to have a coordinated office, a party office, and then a candidate office elsewhere. We should set the terms pretty early on what campaigns want to use and what the coordinator is going to use for their space. Because if we have volunteers going, Pueblo's the example that rings in my mind frequently. So many folks are used to going to the Pueblo Democrats headquarters. And then if we build a coordinated office in some other part of town, that's diverting people away from that office. It's diverting our volunteer base from the people who were there before the election, and they're going to be there after the election. And so I really do think that the chair can have an impact on working with the campaigns so that, even despite our separate budgets and the separate bucket of money that is spent on some of the coordinator races versus what we're spending as CDP or as county parties, I really want to set the terms of engagement early. In my time running campaigns, I've been running campaigns in this state for 20 years. Difficult campaigns, mostly in red areas that were turning blue. I have not yet been served a sort of from a campaign, any sort of terms of engagement, but I know that we would actually relish the opportunity to work with the party early to make sure that we are setting those terms right away, whether we're going to be the nominee or not, making sure that the party is using its time while candidates are duking out who's going to be the nominee to set up a coordinator that's actually going to be really successful. And so I think really that proximity and location, especially in rural Colorado, is going to be really important. A lot of advice I give, and I just gave it to Elizabeth Velasco this past cycle, I've given it to candidates in Western Colorado frequently, is find your 10 to 15 volunteers that you want to hold on to through the campaign and make them a core part of your effort, because eventually the coordinator is going to come and knock in. They're going to wear out your volunteers, they're going to steal them from you, and they're not going to make sure that you have the resources you need to be successful. That's the type of perspective I bring as chair, is that I've had to work around the coordinator for long enough that I know exactly where the problems are. And I want to make sure that we are setting those terms early on how we actually deploy our resources, because if we don't, campaigns, of course, are going to come in and have their self-interest. We need to find that alignment of self-interest between the party and the campaigns early to make sure that we're not diverting our resources in ways that just don't help us achieve success at all levels of the ballot.
Okay, thank you, Shad. So before I let you do your closing, we'd all like to thank you for taking the time tonight. We appreciate your thoughtful answers, and thank you for running. We all know that it's a big undertaking, and we appreciate your commitment to the Colorado Democratic Party. So we have a few minutes left if you have any thoughts you'd like to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Folks, this feels a little bit more like a family reunion for me, seeing your names and pictures on the screen than it might for other candidates. I'm a Western Coloradan through and through. Having this perspective at the state party is something we haven't had in leadership in decades. Having a Westerner in charge of the party is going to give us a crucial perspective in how we win Congressional District 3. The success we've had in Fort Collins, in Denver, and the Boulder kind of diaspora of Democratic success is not something that is immediately transferable to Western Colorado. I've been winning red seats in Western Colorado for the past 10 years, and I want to work with you all to be able to scale up our programs to make sure we win CD3 and that we also start to expand our reach into Eastern Colorado. And I want to make sure that we sort of end this notion that it's too far to drive. You've heard me say that a few times because nothing is more frustrating to me than hearing somebody from the Front Range say, coming and helping your campaign on the Western Slope is too far to drive. I never want to hear that again. And so I want to make sure that we're building a CDP that is truly statewide. That's why I have the support of Barbara McLaughlin. That's why Dylan Roberts was one of my first endorsers. That's why Elizabeth Velasco is supporting me. Megan Lukens is also an endorser of mine. Jonathan Houck from Gunnison County has endorsed me. I have the endorsement of statewide officials across the state, including many folks in the Front Range. I think because they see in me an ability to win campaigns in places we've had no business winning over the past decade. That's not something I take lightly. I'm not doing this campaign or hoping for this job for any title. I'm not seeing it as the next step in my career. I'm seeing it as a fundamental and true opportunity to not only change the face of the Western Slope in the long term, but to make sure that we never let something like Club Q happen again, right? We should never let local officials put their politics before public safety. And that's everything from trying to come after our public lands to not enforcing our gun laws. And so I really hope I can earn your support as a fellow Western Coloradan on April 1st. I think it's a perspective we're direly missing in our state party. We've had so much success in recent years, and I don't want to let this opportunity for us to win CD3 and win local races across Western Colorado slip on by. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate your support and just encourage you to reach out anytime. My website's shadmurib.com. You have my platform. My number is 970-279-3505. Please chime in with your ideas because I want to make sure that my platform for this race is also yours. So thank you again from one Western Coloradan to others and Southern Colorados. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Shad, for your time tonight. We appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for attending.